Welcome to CEO Interviews, a production of Gorecom in which we take the time to interview CEOs and executives of small cap public companies. With us today, I'm happy to have again James Briscoe. He's President and CEO at Liberty Star Uranium. The company trades on the stock symbol LBSR. You can find them on the web, libertystaruranium.com, or as always, get to a Gorecom, get to the hub, talk to other investors, get all the great information you need about this amazing company. For those of you who are new to the story, a little 10-second summary. The company controls properties which are located over what management considers some of North America's richest mineralized regions for copper, gold, silver, molybdenum, and uranium. Today, this is our part 3 of our year-end update that we've had over the last few weeks. And this may be the most fun of all as we discuss the Trump effect. Here to talk about that more is Jim. Jim, welcome to the show.
George, thank you. It's always good to be back at the show, and we get a lot of positive feedback from these Agoracom broadcasts. I'd be happy to stick to business when talking about the positive outcomes we're seeing and will continue to see with a business management-based commander-in-chief. But I'm also going to comment on the uses of the metals that we expect to produce, and so I will spend some time on that.
All right.
I'm actually a little bit late on this presentation, but it's given us a month from inauguration to the current time to see what Trump is really going to do. And boy, is it impressive. He's just going at it hammer and tongs and very smartly and very quickly. So I think we're going to be amazed. I think that we're going into the biggest metals boom the world has ever seen if we continue the way we are.
Well, I'll give you my thoughts on that as we go on, but because clearly all the positive feedback comes from everyone loves to listen to me speaking, right, Jim? Not you.
Yes.
So this new president, he's created quite impact on several business fronts, and we're only going to talk business. We're not talking about social things like that, because the last thing we need is a protest in the front of Liberty Star's offices. But in this first 30 days, quite an impact, several business fronts. The markets are reacting positively so far, and he's not done yet. So let's hear from you as to what you think the Trump effect is going to be like on the business of mining.
All right, I'll see if I can address that. First, the president will place controls on work towards managing the stifling federal bureaucracy and in his vernacular, drain the swamp. Now that's incredibly important to us because at the end of the Obama administration, it was to the point where small businesses and large businesses could hardly work. They were mainly involved in filing and doing government reports of one type or another, or environmental stuff, or anything but business. So he's already doing that. It's already had an effect on the Arizona governor, who challenged the local mining organization that is in favor of mining here in Tucson with, tell me where the red tape is and I'll cut it. So we'll see. But this,
That's great.
This is, this is the leadership that Trump is supplying, and he is electrifying every business person in our area, and I think in the United States, and beyond that, I think in the world. So, secondly, he's going to cut through the over-regulation in the country, including reforming the federal tax code and dismantling the EPA. Now, already, I believe that he has either targeted the death tax or maybe eliminated it. Everything's happening so rapidly, it's hard to keep track. But this is a double taxation, and it has a great effect on small businesses that are trying to pass their assets on from father to son or daughter, as the case may be, and it's very disruptive. So that may be, if it's not already history, it will be. He has pledged to embark on the program of repair and new construction on the U.S. infrastructure. I spent some years living in the Los Angeles basin, actually in Orange County, when the interstate highways were new and they were beautiful. I was back after 25 years absence, and boy, they look pretty grubby and failing and so on. So this needs to be done. Trump has a good start by announcing the appointment of Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt to head the Environmental Protection Agency. Pruitt has a positive record for focusing on restoring or giving more regulatory oversight to states and limiting federal regulations. Viable mining projects killed over the last couple of decades, and we may be able to go a little bit further back than that, but at least the last couple of decades by the EPA are simply too numerous to mention. But among the more famous are the Pebble Copper Gold Mine, which is the largest one in the world, but at least projected to be, and located in southwest Alaska. And that also killed the potential of our Big Chunk prospect related to the surrounding caldera, which is the genetic cause of the Pebble Copper Gold project and was our target for other Pebble-like projects. Of course, those still exist, but we no longer were able to maintain them. Other projects in our list of lost opportunities include the Silver Bell Mining District extension, perhaps 12 or more porphyries in the extension of the Silver Bell caldera when it was identified. And I identified the potential because I knew of a left lateral offset that nobody else had noticed. During the exploration, we perfected our expertise in vegetation geochemistry for buried and hidden porphyry copper targets. And the Silver Bell Geochem program may have been the largest such in the world outside of Australia, according to our geochemist, Shay Clark Smith, which you can see on our homepage. However, it was a very secretive thing, and nobody really knew what we were doing until somewhat later. And really, I don't think people even realize how big it was, but it covered well over several hundred square miles. In our acquisition of the Rosemont mine, which I tried to get, the funders were so frightened of the environmental movement in Pima County that I simply couldn't get it funded, and it was acquired by Augusta and with their subsidiary Rosemont. And the copper moly reserves, which are now drilled out by Augusta, who later sold it to Hud Bay, make it the third largest porphyry copper mine in the United States. And it's essentially almost equivalent to in mineralogical characteristics to Hay Mountain, but Hay Mountain is much, much larger. Rosemont was exposed on the side of a mountain and been known for well over 100 years. As I've talked about, Hay Mountain is not exposed and completely hidden except to geophysics and extreme detailed work that we have done. So that's prelude to a new mine being formed at Rosemont, and I believe a new mine being formed at Hay Mountain. The 20-year moratorium on the Arizona Strip, Colorado Plateau lands in one of the richest uranium mining districts in the world, and this has been underestimated for geologic reasons. But the recent past U.S. or Arizona Geological Survey had done studies on that independent of any other entity and came to the same conclusions before his unfortunate death. But this moratorium made it impossible to retain our large uranium claim block there. We kept some key targets within the North Pipe Super Project, but we were forced to drop most. A reversal of the last 3 decades of confiscatory taking by the federal government, which is really part and parcel of what I think Trump wants to do, could give us back our projects. Who knows? Of course, there needs to be oversight and regulation in terms of the mining industry, but it need not be what we have endured.
Right, so you're still for oversight and regulation. You just think it went too far.
Absolutely. I mean, the silliness of these regulations would be laughable, except they're so damaging. The opponents of Rosemont thought they had the final coup when they discovered an oak tree living flower, an orchid actually, and they brought this up with great glee. And the Rosemont crew went out to every mountain range within a 100-mile radius and found thousands of these things. They're prolific in Mexico. I personally have seen them, and to make that an impediment to a viable mine deal is simply crazy. Then we had the incident with the Jaguar, and it just goes on and on. Silliness, all.
Basically, any small thing to the goal, from what I gather from speaking to you, the goal wasn't truly the protection of the environment. It was stop mining at all costs with whatever little excuse we can find.
That's exactly right, George. And of course, the silliness about a jaguar or any other four-legged animal being impeded by a mine, and this mine is not forever. It's not so large that they would have to travel forever. A jaguar will cover 50 miles in a day.
Yeah.
And
they get over creeks, rivers, mountains, cliffs, hills. So it's not as if they're living in a pristine hotel and you're dropping a hole in the middle of the floor, wondering how are they going to get around this hotel room now.
Exactly. At both the Morenci mine and the Silver Bell mine, there are herds of bighorn sheep that come down to the highways and munch on the vegetation that grows there. It's the easiest place to watch a bighorn sheep. Doesn't have any effect on them at all. The mine doesn't. They love it. So, silliness. Well, at any rate, to continue, I just said that of course there needs to be oversight, and there does. And I've been proposing this since 1966. PhD geologist and hydrologist Jay Lear, who designed the EPA for the Nixon administration, and he's a fellow that I knew when I went to school at the University of Arizona, has related in speeches and writing that the EPA is not what I designed the EPA to do. It is a bureaucracy run amok. The laboratory portion of the EPA is doing useful work, and they should be relocated to the centroid of the United States, which happens to be northern Nebraska. The individual state equivalents of the EPA can more properly handle environmental problems on a state-by-state basis in a way that they know best. The 30,000 EPA bureaucrats in the Washington, D.C. area should be terminated.
And don't be surprised if we actually see something like that happen, given the new appointee, actually.
I think so. And we're looking forward to President Trump's sensible dismantling of the federal EPA, accomplishing the recommendations of his designer to refashion the EPA to better serve citizens and industry. And I'm looking forward to putting more funds into exploration and drilling rather than spending those dollars on our lawyers fighting the federal government and environmentalists, most of which are the same entity. And so if they go, so be it, and so much better for business.
And I got to tell you, you can see the enthusiasm already in the junior mining space in Canada, which is, and I say Canada not because I live here, but because this is where most junior mining takes place. The TSX Venture Exchange is probably the leading exchange for all this, as is the big board for mining companies. And the enthusiasm, the rejuvenation, the money that's starting to come to the table to finance deals and looking to finance deals Jim is, and everybody listening at home, is a 180-degree turnaround of epic proportions. And that's what leads me to believe that the next 5 years is absolutely going to be a boom time for junior mining companies.
The Canadian junior mining business has developed since the early 60s, and you Canadians have figured out how to start with relatively small amounts of money and not interfere with the process. Unfortunately, that has been turning a little bit in Canada as well. But at any rate, the Canadian mining is a phenomena and is a world leader in mine discovery. There's no doubt about that. So, but I think that this will help because Canadian miners and, well, explorers and miners are operating all over the world, and anything that helps the United States will inadvertently or naturally help Canada.
And pardon the pun, but the Canadian mining industry is the canary in the coal mine. So I'll leave it at that and go on to the next question. Hay Mountain, it's fundamentally a copper, gold, moly project. And it's clear that you think it's ideal for what's coming ahead in terms of America's infrastructure efforts. I'm curious for you to expand on that and discuss, what you see as the infrastructure efforts and how these are going to be play a role.
I will do that, but first let me add to your comments about the production. Because of our use of vegetation geochemistry, which is an incredibly good sampling material, or a material to sample geochemistry, and we proved this at Silver Bell because we were given access to the previously inaccessible ASARCO property of the North Silver Belt, and we ran test strips with vegetation, rock, chip, and soil over the then untouched porphyry deposit of the North Silver Belt, called the North Silver Belt deposit. And we verified everything that we had already thought was true in the virgin areas. That's how I know that there's 12 anomalies out there, both to the west and to the east. But in addition to copper, moly, and gold, we have lead and zinc, of course, which is a common associate of porphyries. And beyond that, significant amounts of manganese. And beyond that, uranium and thorium, and a whole plethora of elements. And some of the elements that may be deleterious, we know are there, and we can control them in an appropriate way, rather than just spreading them around. So the Hay Mountain has all the elements that are common in porphyry coppers that we know about, and most do not. And that does include uranium and thorium, and the nearby Bisbee mine produced uranium, as did the Twin Buttes mine. Most porphyry coppers have a uranium component. We just know where it's concentrated. And we have, now that the lithium battery market is booming, it does require cobalt and some other things. And there's an area that I was going to say a small area, but no, it's almost a square mile of iron, nickel, cobalt anomaly, and we're not sure why it's there because it's not terribly typical of porphyry coppers, but Bisbee has produced cobalt and nickel, so it's not unknown, but this could be an important resource in the current world. But let's jump back to the major commodities, and that is copper. And copper is required for everybody in our everyday lives and our electronic future in many ways within a renewed new highway infrastructure. And so the listeners can look at a display pie chart that I was from the London Metal Exchange, and it just shows where copper is used, and a large proportion of it is in the electrical and electronic arena, but also a big chunk in construction and industrial machinery and consumer in general, and then transportation. But when you look at transportation, that's going to increase because of the coming of electric vehicles, not only on the highways but in underground mines. And so we're going to see an increase in that. And the consumer in general, I think we're going to see an increase because we're also looking at a much more buoyant economy, and the figures just came out that our economy for the last month is going upwards. So at any rate, we're going to use a lot of that, and we use copper as personal consumer goods, from phones to refrigerators. Almost everything else in our world needs copper. To be specific of the infrastructure projects for now and the future, automated, and I'm talking about mainly highways here, but automated signage on superhighways tied to smartphones, tied to traffic warnings, weather alerts to make our highways safer, increased smartphone coverage for automated and for automated electric vehicles, which are rapidly coming down the pike. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime, but I think that's almost a fait accompli. It's just a matter of dispersion and having the safe highways to let them run on. And for fast charging stations for electric vehicles. Like it or not, we have to recharge these things, and we have to have fast chargers, and they have to be prolific so that people don't get stranded. These technological advances work together. Modern high-speed charging stations are needed to provide rapid recharge of vehicle batteries, which will be spaced appropriately and tied to the smartphone locator apps. Electric vehicles will require unimaginable amounts of copper. Copper bus interchanges from the batteries to the wheel motors to drive the vehicle, and then back when electric braking over reverses the flow and recharges the batteries until forward motion is again necessary. To run all the electronic devices used in a vehicle, automated or not, including electric windows, sat radios, heated and cooled seating, full vehicle heating and cooling, and we're pretty familiar with a lot of this. And onboard computers of many types, lights, guidance devices, and automatic controls, electronic entertainment, and TV and computers. Copper has been around for approximately 10,000 years. In my notes, I've written down 5,000, but that's incorrect. It's 10,000. Its uses have expanded over time from simple cooking vessels and weapons to many modern uses for now and tomorrow. And the average American home, and I would say Canadian home as well, contains about 120 small motors wound with copper wire. If you don't believe that, think about your electric toothbrush, your CD player, et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to count that up. And HVAC units with multitudes of copper tubes. Copper is the best conductor of heat as well as electricity. And copper uses are only increasing. Freshwater tubing and pipes, germ-free door handles and surfaces, and copper zinc containing clothing as a permanent germicide.
Okay, that's a new one. That's a new one on me.
Well, and it's a new one on most people, but copper push plates in hospitals, the doctors and the hospital administrators have realized that if you push a regular door, you get germs on your hand. If it's a copper push plate, the copper actually kills microbes and viruses. So yes, they're trying to switch over to all copper touch places, and so germicidal clothing such as the astronauts wore is prolific and very, very popular. Long-lasting roofing. Gosh, in Toronto you have beautiful old copper roofs that make the city so nice. Plant fertilizer and algicide and too many others to name. We just can't get away from the use of copper. As the world population grows, the use of copper for all of these things will grow too, and is inexorable. The use of copper in the next 30 years that has to be supplied from mines will be equivalent to all the copper ever mined in all 10,000 years of human history. It's unimaginable, and I think it portends a major increase in copper, and we may see the day when people look back fondly at $5 copper because it then costs $10. But at any rate, that's obviously a projection of mine. In addition to copper, we're going to produce a lot of molybdenum, and we expect the presence of moly. Well, we know it's there because we can see it geochemically, and it's associated with all porphyry coppers. And it's an important industrial metal, and will be critical to Liberty Star. And it's used in high-strength alloys, require molybdenum. Other metals, including rebar, will need it as well. Oil pipelines, drilling pipes must be tough and require high moly steel, oxide-proof paints, armor plate, and finally, Trump has authorized the Keystone and XL pipelines, thank God. Final construction using U.S. manufactured steel, which will require major amounts of molybdenum for strength, and more metallurgical coal, of course, is going to be required. But as we drill more and more diamond drill holes and oil well holes, all of that needs high moly, high strength steel. So that will cause mining in North America to burgeon, and we hope in Hay Mountain as well. And Hay Mountain zinc for galvanized bolts and parts that otherwise rust when exposed to the weather will prevent bridge steel from weakening due to rusting. And the Chinese apparently, in all of their bridges, used galvanized steel so that they do not rust.
Jim, you surprised me here because, for old school, down to earth guy, traditional, you're on quite a roll regarding what you predict for growth in the industry, all the technologies, and so on and so forth. And how it relates to Hay Mountain. I got to admit, I'm really impressed because I didn't think you're going to go through that extensive of a list, which is great, by the way, but not just extensive, but really, you taught me a few new things, and I'm sure you're teaching people at home a few new things as well. So hats off to you on that. That's for sure.
Well, I hope I haven't bored anybody.
No.
I think about this a lot, and we have a saying down here, an anti-environmental saying that if it isn't grown, it has to be mined, and that includes all the stuff that porphyry coppers hold and the other things that we're targeting as well. So it's I always find, particularly for women, we have a good friend who I talked about copper in her car, and she said, I didn't know that my car had copper in it. Well, yeah, how about the ignition switch and your battery and all this other stuff. So it's stuff that people simply don't think about, but it is absolutely vital.
Jim, switching gears here for a second. When you first started with Agoracom, uranium was at the center of the company. And like you, I keep hearing about Yellowcake's optimistic future. Especially here in Canada, they're talking about uranium companies. They're talking about prices rising. They're talking about a positive outlook for it. But I'd like to hear it from you. You're the pro, and everyone at home. Tell us what you're thinking about uranium now.
Well, I read a book when we first got started in uranium exploration. It was done by a gal who used to be assigned carrying crowd joiner that said no more nukes, and she had a friend, high school and college friend who was a nuclear engineer, and she said, how can you possibly work for such a horrible industry? And he said, if you want to take the time, I will tell you, but it's going to take a lot of time. And she decided that she would learn, and it took her a couple of years because he took her right through the exploration stage on into the nuclear plant stage. And it's a fascinating book. But the reality is that uranium is the power to save the world. And I really believe that. I had the opportunity to discuss uranium exploration in front of the Arizona Senate Subcommittee on Power and Water, because we have a major problem in Arizona with power since the EPA wants to close down all the coal mines. And the coal mines power the Central Arizona project that brings water to Phoenix and Tucson. And without that, most cities would die and all the population would have to be evacuated because they can't live without water. And the coal companies couldn't justify a price increase to pay for greater controls on their coal plants because it would have bankrupted a good share of their customers, and then they would have been in worse financial shape than before. So I don't want to get too far afield in that, but I had the opportunity to present what can be done. And one of the things that I brought up was the Toshiba Galena reactor project, which is circa 2008. And it's called the Super Safe Small Simple, or 4S, micronuclear reactor. And I could go into the design of that, but that would bore everyone. But what it is, what it is essentially a nuclear battery. And these are embedded 90 feet into the ground. They don't need anybody to do anything but just be kind of a watch person on these. They're impervious to attack by malicious people or ground military attack or air military attack, simply because they're buried. They're really hard to see. But they can be built to last 80 years. And what I would suggest is that for the highways that we're going to build with electric cars traveling on them, these things can be placed strategically, and they make power for about half the cost of a great big nuclear plant with transmission wires, which are really subject to attack by the enemies that we have around the world. So we really don't want to do that, but these little nuclear plants would do just great. But there's nuclear plants of all designs and purposes, and they produce power 24/7, not much supervision, and there's plenty of uranium around if we look for it. And at porphyry copper mines, including Hay Mountain, there is a zonal arrangement of uranium and thorium, and so we can produce both. And this will be probably a byproduct, depending on the price ratio between copper and uranium, but we will produce uranium. And so this is one of the things that we will do.
Okay, we've talked a lot up to this point, and you've covered a lot of great stuff. The bottom line being Trump is going to be great for mining. But what I didn't see coming, because I thought we were going to really focus a lot on that, what I didn't see coming was that his infrastructure plan and expansion plan and getting all these things going, how that was going to be another supercharged demand item for mining. I knew there'd be some, obviously, but the way you laid it out there, how one domino leads to the next, is that was pretty comprehensive. So I'm not going to ask you any further questions on that, but I do want to ask you your final thoughts on the future of mining.
Okay. Well, I've been thinking about this for a very long time because I felt I was an environmentalist to begin with. And when I went to work in my first porphyry copper mine, I felt that there was not enough attention being paid to making the mine openings and dumps aesthetic so that they didn't look bad for the passing motorist, if there were any. And so that was, I would think I was ahead of my time by about 30 years or 20 years anyway. But when we started on uranium, I had to make an application for uranium processing. And so I addressed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission meeting in 2006 with a plan on how to disguise mines while they were operating and how they could be remediated during mining so that they would not leak any mineral material from the mine site, and how they could be completely remediated, never to be seen again. And I called this the Briscoe Invisible Mine Plan. But it's applicable to any mine of any size, large or small, whatever it might be. And the plan would not really add substantial costs, and in the long term may be much, much less expensive. But we obviously had a problem up on the Arizona Strip because environmentalists didn't want to see any sign of a mine, even while it was being dug. So I did quite a study on that, and I presented it to the NRC, and it was very, very well received. And I was approached by one environmental lawyer who said, and this is a quotation, "I've been coming to these addresses for 30 years. Your talk was the most insightful I have ever seen here, and I would be happy to help you bring this to the approval," and that would be of the NRC. But using the IMP, or Invisible Mine Plan, mine pollution can be prevented. The mine of any type can be aesthetically configured so as not to be visible during the operation. We did some pretty innovative things, but at any rate, it's mainly paying attention to what's obvious. Beyond the edges of the mine, which will be interior to a permanent mine overburden and non-mineral rock repositories, there will be, and this is outside of that perimeter, there will be no noise, no dust, no light pollution, no emission of acid mine drainage, and the terrain can very quickly be designed to look compatible with the surrounding topography, and the ground immediately revegetated as mining progressed. Mines of all types can be successfully remediated using the Briscoe IMP architecture, technical procedures, and methodology. When the last ton of ore is mined, the final vegetation will be planted over the small remaining unremediated area. Equipment will be removed from the center where the mine is, and everything will go back to nature. And that's the end. And I will say that the Rosemont people actually did certain aspects of that, because this isn't rocket science, it's science. It's just something that I've been thinking about for a very, very long time, and finally put pen to paper and proposed it. And there's a lot of innovative things that are essentially off the shelf supplies that you can do, not very expensively, but it has to be a lot of forethought paid into it. But this is real. This is not pie in the sky.
Jim, thanks so much. Your expertise, your knowledge, your ability to be able to put all this into layman's terms so the rest of us can understand exactly where your mind is at, where you're thinking of, where the industry's going is incredibly appreciated, and there's no wonder that you get such fantastic reaction to these interviews. So the last thing I'll say is, looking forward to you putting all of this into action in 2017 as interest starts to build and money starts to come back and people start knocking on doors, and I'm looking forward to you getting your chance to show the world what you can do and what Liberty Star can do.
Thank you, George. It's always a pleasure.
You've been listening to James Briscoe. He's CEO and president of Liberty Star Uranium. The company trades on the stock symbol LBSR. You can find them on the web at libertystaruranium.com. And of course, get to Agoracom, punch in the company's name or stock symbol to get to the hub, where you can watch and listen to all the great interviews we did, both video and audio, that we've done with Jim over the time, as well as meet and connect with fantastic investors, the great IR team, and have civilized discussion, get all the answers you need. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time.